and welcome to another episode of The Clever Clarinetist. I'm your host, Dr. Larkin Sanders. Today we're talking about reeds and ReedGeeks. It's so exciting. I have got 5 different models of the ReedGeek in stock right now, and they are by far and away my favorite tools for clarinet playing in general, but especially for like working on reeds. So I'm going to talk about troubleshooting reed problems with your ReedGeek and talk about what the benefits are going to be for each individual ReedGeek and how to make this practice kind of sustainable for you and making sure you have the best reeds possible at all times. All right, I'm going to open up this brand new D'Addario Reserve Classic 3.5. This is my typical reed of choice, but as you can see, it is in the package. It has not been opened yet. So we will get whatever first impression we can from this brand new reed. All right, so I have my new reed set up on my mouthpiece, and for once I'm hoping for a less than ideal reed so that we can do lots of work on it with our tools and take it from being a crummy reed to a pretty good reed. But let's see how it goes. Cool, not a great reed from first impressions. I'm going to play a couple scales just to get used to it. Okay, my first impressions of this reed are that it's a little bit on the hard side for a 3.5. It's a little bit stuffy, and it also might be a little bit unbalanced. So we're going to get to the troubleshooting of this lovely stuff and then work on correcting it as well. Typically with new reeds, I would like to give them about 2 weeks to settle into themselves or to break them in before I really start working on it, but we're just gonna, for the sake of experimentation and learning, we're just gonna dive right into adjusting this reed. So the first thing I noticed is that it was a little bit hard, a little bit on the resistant side of things. And so what I'm gonna do for that is I'm gonna scrape the back side of the reed with my ReedGeek. All right, so before you, I have laid out all of my most favorite things from ReedGeek, including, and my own personal mouthpiece in this reed we just tried to do some work, some magic, some witchcraft on our reeds today. So the first thing we're going to do, I'm going to set my mouthpiece aside for later. First thing I'm going to do is chart out the heart of the reed using my plaque and gauge set from ReedGeek. So according to the manufacturer and a quick measurement test on my mouthpiece, I could determine that the distance from the departure point of the mouthpiece where the reed leaves the mouthpiece to vibrate and the tip is about 18 millimeters. And I did that by placing my mouthpiece on the back side of this plaque with the tip flush to that line at the top of the mouthpiece. Very good. And double checking on the other side to make sure that it's flush. And using the gauge from ReedGeek, which is thinner than a strand of hair, and slid it in here to see where it stops. Oh, sorry, I'm ridiculous. That is correct. 18 millimeters, pretty much on the nose. You can see right there. And so now that will help us to determine a lot of things about reed adjustment as we go. So that's something good to do with your reeds when you get them. And you only have to do that mouthpiece measurement in theory one time. It might change over time, but if you check in with your mouthpiece every once in a while and you see that it is changing, it probably means it's time for a refacing or to buy a new mouthpiece. However you roll. If you don't believe in refacing, you know, whatever, go buy a new mouthpiece. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to give myself a couple little guidelines with my tiny pencil and my left-handedness at the 18 millimeter mark on both sides. Good, so now you can see, just like we would do in elementary school math class or art class, where she's gonna sketch a line across the reed. Very good. So this is the point where the reed should be leaving the mouthpiece in order to vibrate on my clarinet mouthpiece specifically. Then I'm going to kind of eyeball the center of the tip of my mouthpiece here. Let's call it here. And I'm going to sketch the line between these 2 points, creating really a series of triangles on my reed. And graphite is not toxic. You can draw on your reed and put it in your mouth again, and you should be fine. All right, so this is cool. This is a really helpful piece of information designed by ReedGeek, thanks to the plaque and gauge set. So now we know that this area here is what we call the heart of the reed, right? This is the part that a lot of reed purists say, don't touch this part. No, don't do it. But I'm a little bit different. I think it's not sacred or anything. If it needs adjusting, it needs adjusting, and it's something worth experimenting with. You know, bad reeds only have two ways they can go. They can either get better or they can go in the trash, right? So it's worth working on. Okay, so we're going to save this information for later. I just wanted to go ahead and demonstrate the ReedGeek plaque and gauge set. Super handy. So like I said earlier, the flat part of the reed isn't often flat, so we're going to flatten it out a little bit. And traditionally, I think people would use sandpaper or bastard files to do this. We're going to use our ReedGeek. ReedGeek really can take the place of your sandpaper and your knife. If you're a knife user, old school with your reed adjustment, this is one way to throw out your toolbox for a single tool. And to flatten the backside of the reed, we're going to start with the simplest and least expensive of the geeks, and this is called the Geeklet. This is something that I think you can only find in 2 different shops. In my shop, The Clever Clarinetist, and also Better Sax. So if you're interested in the Geeklet, I hope you'll go visit my store. It's only about $50. It has this cute little plastic handle. It's made of tungsten carbide at the end. And so basically it's a great introduction to ReedGeeks without putting a major investment into it or without getting anything like super intense like any of these 4. And it has all the basic things you need from your ReedGeek, including these square edges and what they call the eraser tip at the end. And the eraser tip is for working in the more delicate regions of the reed. And then these squared edges are more for doing large scale work. So we're going to flatten the backside of the reed by placing the reed in our finger. We're going to let our fingertip kind of come to the tip of the reed and let it, the reed balance there. Kind of like a reed gun. Pew, pew. Very good. And to use the ReedGeek on the back to flatten it, we're going to set the ReedGeek flat or as flat as it can be on this reed. And we're just going to tilt it up and start scraping like so. Woo-hoo. Look at all that wood coming off. No, it's not wood. It's grass. Look at all that cane coming up. Fun fact, reeds are not made of wood. They're made of cane, which is a subspecies of grass. You are welcome. All right. And so for my own idiosyncrasies, I tend to go back and forth a little bit on my reeds to make sure that they're flat and even. Great. And you can kind of tell when it's getting flat because it'll get this really smooth texture on the back of the reed, like it will if you sand it on sandpaper. Get nice and smooth. All right. And this is where that nice triangle comes in to be helpful. I'm going to I just wetted my reed a little bit so the graphite's kind of bleeding on the cane, but that's okay. I'm going to put the reed back on the mouthpiece and make sure that it is no longer warped by using my my gauge. And it should stop where that line is. Oh, like a charm! Like a charm! So according to this, the reed is pretty much perfectly flat. Especially for this mouthpiece, it should work pretty well. Hooray. If you want to know if your reed is warped and you don't feel like dealing with drawing out the little triangle on your reed and all that, like reed mapping stuff, there's a really quick and fun trick you can do to determine if the reed is warped. So if a reed is not warped, it will not seal properly on your mouthpiece, which is why we get like fun air noises and squeaks when our reed is nice and warped. And it's kind of fun and amusing. So what you do is you take your mouthpiece and barrel off your mouthpiece and you find a way to plug up this end of your barrel, which usually will work with the fleshy part of your palm, and you suck. So now that I've been working on the flat side of my reed, it's nice and sealed. Another thing that I noticed about this reed is that it's probably a little bit unbalanced. It gets a pretty good sound, but the level of resistance is a little bit strange. Like, I can't exactly tell where it's coming from, which is usually a sign that the reed is unbalanced. That is, one side of the reed is denser than the other side. And this is a good thing to just try and troubleshoot when you have a reed that you're not super fond of, especially when you can't figure out what the source of the problem is. It's probably an unbalanced reed. So to check for an unbalanced reed, we check both sides of the reed, and we do that this way. By tilting the mouthpiece in your mouth from side to side while closing off one side of the reed at a time, letting the other one vibrate freely so you get a good impression of the balance of the reed. So I'm going to tilt my mouthpiece up this way, closing this side of the reed, opening this side. And now I'm going to turn it and do the same thing. I'm just playing an open G. Alright, so I can tell that this side of the reed is a little bit harder than the other side. So let me show you how to fix this with your ReedGeek. Okay, so now that we know this reed is flat, but it's also a little bit unbalanced, so we're going to use another tool to work on the balance. And for this, let's use I'm going to use the Black Diamond by ReedGeek. The Black Diamond is real special because it has a whole bunch of different edges to it to use, but it also doesn't come with one of these handles. For me, the handle is a little bit much. I feel a little bit unwieldy with these giant handles, but you can always take them off too. If you're interested in using a ReedGeek without the handle, that is totally available to you. You can take it off. It's not a big deal. So if you're interested in trying a handle but not convinced by it, I really recommend getting either a Double Geek or a ReedGeek Universal Special, because the Universal Special also comes with handles now. And Double Geek, I believe, comes with this long handle and also this nice little plastic handle, so you can kind of go back and forth. But we're going to use Black Diamond for this part. And especially this eraser head tip that's famous on ReedGeeks. You can see all these ReedGeeks have that edge to it, the eraser head edge, in addition to their square sides. Yep, there you go. And some of them have extra bevels, like the Double Geek has extra bevels here, beveled edges. The Universal Special does not. The Bullet has them, and so does Black Diamond. These all have some special beveled edges. So we're going to come back to that beveled edge in a minute, but for now we're going to use this eraser head to adjust the tips of our reed. So this is where the other side of your plaque can come into handy. You can see it says tip work here. Super handy. But so these unfortunately scratch pretty well. So if you intend to use your plaque and gauge for tip work, I encourage you to also just get like a chunk of acrylic at the hardware store so you don't scratch up your plaque too much. So I'm going to use just this finger-sized piece of acrylic that my friend Jeff Brooks at Clarinet Monster once upon made me to work on this tip. So you can see I banged it up and it's not such a big deal here. So here we go. I'm using the eraser tip. I'm scratching off some cane in the corner. Oh, this is where the other part of that triangle comes in handy. Because when you're working on balanced reeds, you might hear, oh, just shave some cane off of that side of the reed. Well, that seems a little general to me. I like having a little bit more of a plan and have, you know, a plan. I like having a plan. So drawing this triangle into my reed gives me a plan. And since I've measured my mouthpiece, I can just go ahead and draw this triangle straight onto my reed without having to remeasure the mouthpiece every time. I'm going to take a little bit more off. And that's probably good. Remember that when you're taking cane off your reed, you can always take cane off, but you can't always put it back on. So don't take off too much. So let's say you've been working on a reed for a while and it's still just kind of fuzzy, even after balancing it, flattening it, all that good stuff. Let's talk about what you can do about that. Okay, so let's say you've done all this troubleshooting and you're still getting a little bit of fuzziness, or the reed is old and gunky. This is a technique I like to use on my old gunky reeds. And for this, I'm going to use the bullet. And the bullet is my most favorite ReedGeek tool. It's really dense and heavy, and it's little, but it also has this cool handle that feels like reed rush. And I know in my early days of reed working, I learned how to use reed rush for adjusting. So if you've ever used reed rush and knives and sandpaper, you'll appreciate the simplicity of the bullet, having all three of those tools in one teeny tiny package. And it also has these special beveled edges, which are also featured on Black Diamond, which we just saw, and also the Double Geek. And we're going to use these special beveled edges and this fun sandpapery reed rushy end for this last adjustment. So if your reed is just generally fuzzy, something that's good to do is to take cane off from these corners, which you can see I'm just holding it with my fingers here, and I'm using this beveled edge to kind of gently scrape away at the corners. And this effect works better if you're using unfiled cane or unfiled reeds like this, so that means that the bark is filed here and it's kind of blank up here. So most clarinet reeds for classical musicians are unfiled. The Reserve Classic, Reserve, Van Doren, Traditional, and V12 at least are all going to be unfiled. The filed cane is going to be like Van Doren, Rula Peak, and the D'Addario Evolution reeds are going to be unfiled reeds. So this is a filed reed. So I might work on the other side too. And again, your first finger is always a good choice for supporting the reed, especially if you don't want to mess with your plaque and gauge for a second, or you don't have them on you. So like this will never hurt me. I'm trying really hard, obviously. But that's one of the many benefits of the ReedGeek. I think it's pretty obvious, but maybe it's not so obvious, is that they're not dangerous like knives can be. So it's something you can use with kids to help them learn to adjust their reeds, and they won't hurt themselves. It's also something you can carry on to an airplane and not get confiscated by TSA. Woohoo! You can carry these suckers on the airplane without any issues. They're totally legal. So that's how you get kind of some of the fuzziness out. You work on the corners a little bit. Oh yeah, and I'm going to show you a way to kind of clean off the top of the reed. So you might have used reed rush in the past for those kinds of adjustment, which you can use this end of the bullet to do as well. And sometimes I just like to do this with any old reeds that kind of have accumulated gunk or mold. I don't play with moldy reeds. No one should. You should never do that. I certainly wouldn't. But if you are experienced in polishing your reeds, especially if you're interested in polishing the tops of the reeds, this is a great alternative. This really will get the fibers on the top of the reed to lie down and calm down. So yeah, also eliminating the need for white printer paper in your toolbox. Yeah. So this reed has had the crap adjusted out of it, and let's see how it plays now. All right, we've done all kinds of adjustments on this reed. So let's see how it plays now. Hopefully it's going to be like the best reed in my box after all the adjustments we made. Yes! Oh my god, it's so much better. It's like a totally different reed. And after all that work, it better be. But it wouldn't be possible without the ReedGeek tools, and I love them. So now you've seen all these ReedGeeks, and you're probably wondering which tools are going to be right for you. So like I said earlier, if you are new to adjusting reeds, I strongly suggest starting with the Geeklet. It's an inexpensive way to get started. It's super easy to use. It doesn't have a ton of bells and whistles like some of the other geeks do. It has that eraser head, it has the square edges, and it has this nice comfy little handle. So to me, this is the best place to get started. If you've never done it before, I super duper recommend it. My favorite tool in the ReedGeek lineup is the bullet. This is great for clarinetists and saxophonists especially, I would say this is a pretty single reed exclusive tool, although I'm sure double reed players can find any way to use any kind of reed tool. Due to this like reed rushy part, I would call this a pretty single reed heavy tool. So I love I love the Bullet because it's like nice and heavy and solid, but also nice and compact compared to the other Geeks. If you look at that, I like how many different cutting edges there are on it. So you have this eraser head, we have the beveled edges, we still have the square sides, and we also have this very handy sandpaperish reed rushish handle. So for me, this is the best tool all-in-one situation that you can get from ReedGeek. The Black Diamond is really similar to the Bullet in that it has the same kind of beveled edges, eraser head, and square edges that you can expect from ReedGeek without this kind of reed rush handle. It's lighter in weight, and it's a little bit larger, and it's kind of got that standard ReedGeek feel. So if you are an old hat at ReedGeek but looking for an upgrade, this might be a good option for you to add those beveled edges into your life. Then we have ReedGeek Universal Special. This is the ReedGeek I started off with, actually. It didn't come with this handle, but it was just the Geek itself. And it has these somewhat beveled edges that you can also use for shaving out the size of your reed, like I was doing with these more severe bevels here. They're a little bit harder to control because they're at the very end of the Geek, but still very handy nevertheless. And yeah, like I said, you've got the eraser head, the squared edges, these little bevels up here, and these come with these long handles now. So if you're more used to using a knife and looking for a change, wanting to take your reed adjustment tools on the airplane, the ReedGeek Universal Special is probably a great option for you. And then the Double Geek is a lot like if the ReedGeek Universal Special and Black Diamond had a baby. My double reed friends, I think, are big fans of the Double Geek. So if you're a double reed player, this would be a really great choice for you because of the many different cutting edges. You can take it apart and just use this piece of the ReedGeek if you want. It also comes with a little plastic handle like the one you see on the Geeklet if you want something a little bit more compact. Like I've said, the long handle is a little bit unwieldy for me, so I would probably ditch the long handle personally. But it comes with these nice severe beveled edges and the mild beveled edges here for some more fine-tuned edge work. It has this eraser head, and it has these squared edges that you can use for flattening the reed. If you are interested in something like the Black Diamond or the Bullet, but you have maybe some like dexterity issues, or you just like the feel of a handle, then the Double Geek is probably the right option for you. So here you have the full lineup of ReedGeeks available at the Clever Clarinetist. If you're interested in purchasing one, I totally recommend that you go check out my website, cleverclarinetist.com. Go find the page about ReedGeeks. Oh, and can't forget the plaque and gauge, of course. And if you have any questions, feel free to comment them below, or shoot me an email, larkin@cleverclarinetist.com, or send me a submission via my website. I'd love to help you pick out a ReedGeek. And if you're in the Kansas City area and you'd like to do an in-person workshop or trial of the ReedGeeks, we can totally set that up for you, and I can work with you one-on-one to make sure you pick out exactly the right ReedGeek for you. Like I said, if you're interested in picking one out for yourself, please let me know. If you use ReedGeek, please comment below with your experiences, and if I missed some cool technique on using ReedGeek, please let me know. Maybe I don't know about it, maybe I forgot about it, but maybe I also don't know. And I love to get even more out of my ReedGeek than I already do now. If you are curious about getting more in depth about ReedGeek, I encourage you to visit ReedGeeks' YouTube page, where inventor and owner Morrow will take you through all of the techniques of ReedGeek and how to use them to their absolute fullest. This is just a little bit of a peek in the way I use my ReedGeeks and how I recommend clarinetists use them. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.